Okay, so it's now live streaming.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks everyone for joining our online planning advisory committee meeting. As ever, please bear with us if there are any technical issues. The meeting has to be halted for whatever reason. The minutes will be posted on our website as usual. And also please be aware this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are automatically muted. If you'd like to raise a question, please let us know through the Q&A facility, and then we can unmute and you can raise the question. We'd like to ask that all attendees post questions and comments through the Q&A board. It's easier that way for us. We will be running the meeting as a safe space. We encourage all participants to be respectful of others' opinions, views, and be mindful that what you say may impact on the emotions of others. If attendees would like to ask questions directly, as I say, we will enable them to join the meeting via video if we can, or audio if they prefer. As normal, councillors, if you wish to comment on a question, please either physically raise your hand or your blue hand so that I can see you clearly or Hannah can see you clearly, and we will select as per normal. Similarly, voting councillors, please raise your hand until the vote has been recorded by Jane and Hannah. Jane will be clerking as normal to ensure we don't miss any important questions, and attempt to show plans and photos on the screen where necessary, and Hannah will take the minutes. So without further ado, agenda item number 1, questions, comments and information from the public and councillors which aren't relevant to any of the applications that we will be discussing tonight. So if there are any, great. Agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and any declaration of members' interests. Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest, please, on application number 396. The applicant is my neighbour.
Great, thank you. And Hannah, do we have any apologies?
No, we haven't received any, unless
okay, thank you.
Someone. Oh.
We've got Lizzie and Jane.
A declaration of interest because Saxon Vale is on our agenda. It's a personal interest as a director of Froome Renewable Energy Corp, which has been in discussions with Acorn about potential for renewable energy generation on site. It's a non-pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you. Rich, I'm guessing that's the same.
Similar interest, free co-shareholder, 250 quid's worth.
Thanks, Rich. And Jane?
Just to say, I have received apologies from Andy Palmer.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realise. Yeah, I've got 250 quid's worth of free co as well, so I better declare an interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
And similarly, me, I have shares in Freeco too, so I declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. Anything else? No, great. Item number 3 on the agenda, to agree the minutes of the meeting on the 8th of October. Hopefully everyone has read the minutes. I have them here. So if anyone's got any questions or comments, if not, could I ask someone to propose then, please, that we accept the minutes? Thank you, Anne. And a seconder, thank you, John. And all those in favour?
That's unanimous, thank you. Sorry, could I just ask, Hannah, have you seen the message from Anita? She can't get in.
Okay, I'll send her another link now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So item number 4 on the agenda, to agree a response to the Saxon Vale additional documents submitted on the 24th of September 2020. So I now hand over to Jane or Peter? Jane?
Me.
Jane, excellent.
Yeah. Thank you. So I don't have any slides to show you. I'm just going to go through the key points raised in the report. I'm going to do this in reverse order from that in the report, as I think most of the discussion will be around the viability assessment. So starting with the plan of the live work units, we have said that the plan needs to clearly state that the ground floor and first floor will have a separate access, and it must be confirmed that no planning permission will be required to switch between the uses. Following a conversation with Luke Cleary and Simon Gate of Acorn Property Group this morning, they have said that both floors have the ability to provide a separate access, but it would be down to the occupier as to where they want those accesses to be, depending on how they choose to use the property. And that level of detail is something that would be set out in the detailed reserved matters application when it's submitted. Then move on to the travel plan, which I said should be published so that it can be coordinated with the existing town and other site allocations. And just to confirm that it has been published, but we would hope that Mendip and County Highways will look at the travel plan in this context, and that any future monitoring reports were also published. Next, we have the heads of terms for the Section 106 legal agreement. I've proposed some changes that I think are needed, which again I'll summarise. So the financial contributions for both the works to the Gorehedge Junction and the Garsdale Roundabout should become payable on the occupation of the 100th house or less, and not on the occupation of the 225th house, because there'll be a significant amount of extra traffic by the time 250 dwellings are occupied, and we want to minimise that impact. I also stated that the wording in the agreement should not tie the final design of the Gorehedge Junction works to the indicative scheme for the layout of the junction, because contributions to fully fund the scheme will be required from other developments yet to gain planning permission, which may take some time. By then, opinions and priorities could have changed regarding pedestrians and cyclists. We want to ensure that there's some flexibility to allow for this. The provision of the footbridge across the Willow Vale is also proposed to be provided after the occupation of the 225th dwelling. And again, we want to ensure that if it is feasible to provide the bridge, that it's delivered as soon as possible to encourage people to walk and cycle and to provide access to the riverside open space. It's also proposed that all contributions that are not spent within 5 years of the Section 106 agreement being signed are returned to the developer. This timeframe is too short, as it may well take longer than that for sufficient contributions towards the Gorehedge Junction to come forward. And I've suggested that this timeframe should be extended to 10 years. And in addition to that, if the feasibility for the footbridge determines that it's not achievable, rather than the contributions for the bridge being returned to the developers, it should be reinvested into cycling and pedestrian schemes to compensate for the loss of the bridge. And finally, we come on to the financial viability assessment, which has only recently been published, so we haven't had a great deal of time to look through this. So in my report, I've questioned some of the comparators used in the assessment. For example, the potential rent received for the office accommodation is based in Bath and Trowbridge, and some of the retail units compared I don't feel are a good comparison. I know the Civic Society and Chamber of Commerce have also questioned the accuracy of some of the other costs, including the construction costs and how the land value was calculated. And as I've stated in the report, they have also asked for those costs to be looked at by an independent assessor, so someone who actually understands viability assessments, and that the independent assessment is also published. I also questioned whether Mendip were applying a premium to the existing land use value. Not being an expert in viability assessments, that wasn't clear to me. And following our discussions with Acorn this morning, they have confirmed that Mendip are not taking a premium from the sale of this site. So to clarify, as it's not really clear in my report, if it is accepted by the independent assessor that the comparators used are acceptable, then the viability does demonstrate that Acorn cannot provide 30% of affordable housing. However, I don't think we should commit to that until we've seen the independent assessment. I should also clarify that any other receipts, profit, however you want to describe it, that Mendip may get from the development that are not part of the viability assessment are probably matters outside of the scope of planning. It did, however, include the issue of Mendip's profit in the report, because as stated, we feel it's important that any profit is put back into the development so that 30% affordable housing can be achieved. My aim being to prompt discussion around this. I'm sure councillors and attendees will have some questions. We may not be able to answer them all, and you also might feel that after your discussions, the proposed response needs amending. So, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks for that concise explanation. I did try and read the viability assessment myself, but yeah, 62 pages was yeah, quite impressive. Any questions from any councillors? We'll start there. No interest. Rich.
Well, just to say that thank you, Jane. I think it's a really good report. It summarises everything that we've been discussing. I totally agree with everything that you've put down there. So thank you.
Okay. I do have a point of information from Barry O'Leary, who's one of the attendees, and he's just said it needs to be remembered that these documents are Acorn's viability and not Mendip's. So thanks for that. Thanks for that, Barry. Anne, did you have something?
I was only going to say thank you very much, Jane. I found your report very easy to read, unlike the viability assessment. Thank you.
Any other questions? Lizzie?
This is sort of slightly going outside the realm of normal questions, because it's actually a question to Barry, who made the comment that this is Acorn's viability assessment, not Mendip's. But does that mean that Mendip has a separate sort of set of information? I don't know.
I don't know. Barry, would you want to answer that? Is that something you can answer for us?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello there.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. I'm just here as an observer, and I'm not, you know, I'm not as such with the information to hand. But what will happen, of course, is this is a normal planning application. Mendip is the landowner, as you all know, and then Acorn is the developer, people who will deliver this per se. And you have obviously then got a board at Mendip, which includes FTC participation. There is no other viability assessment other than the one that is attached by Mendip that's associated with this planning application. But I don't want to get into it, you know, going through detail, not because I'm not willing to, but I'm constrained by the way the governance of the board is, and I don't want to jeopardize that board or to put either of your colleagues who participate in that board into an awkward position. But they have all the information I have, and you have all the information they have, I believe. And I believe that's true and accurate. I know that's a kind of a half answer, but it's the best I can do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
No worries, my pleasure.
Any other questions?
So Barry did put in the chat, are they not proposing 80% social rented and 20% affordable?
I think that was
sorry, Hannah?
I think that was John Clark actually.
Oh, right.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was. You're correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I allow John to talk, or?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, he's going to have to be a panelist because he's using an older version.
Hello, John.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, I didn't, perhaps I got it wrong, Jane, but I understood from the Section 106 agreement that that it wasn't being proposed that there should be 80% social housing rent and 20% affordable, as in the local plan. I can't remember what figure they had proposed. I just wondered if that's correct, in which case should not Frome Town Council recommend that any social rented and affordable housing percentages be as in the local plan, which is 80%, 20%. That's a question.
Okay, I'll be honest with you, John. I can't recall what it says either, but I can certainly go back and check that, unless we have anybody attending who is able to clarify that for us.
I do know it's not saying 80%,
Okay.
20%, because I've queried it myself with the planning officer, but I haven't had a response as yet. The other thing, can I comment on the viability assessment? In the sense that my understanding is that Mendip District Council are undertaking their own viability assessment by an independent person, and that should be available. Well, I haven't been told it's going to be public, but they are doing that, which you would expect them to do, because they would need to make their own judgments, particularly around the land value, the base land value, for example.
Yeah, in my experience, most viability assessments are then, certainly anything on this scale, Mendip do have them independently assessed. As you say, whether that is published as a matter of course or not, I don't know, but we would certainly like to see it, just to give us the confidence really that around the figures that are stated in the assessment from Acorn.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Rich.
Just to say thank you to Acorn for publishing a viability assessment. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very.
They had to.
Very valid. Yeah. Anything else? If not, Jane.
Well, I was just going to say, seeing as we seem to have come to the end of the questions, whether or not you feel that any amendments to my response are required, based on what I said about clarifying, excuse me, the points about Mendip's profit.
No. I quite like your report, quite frankly. Anyone else got any comments? John?
No, I say we take it as read.
Yeah, I agree. Well, if there's no other comments, should we go straight to vote? So if someone could propose the response as submitted by Jane. Anne, thank you. Someone second? John? And all those in favour?
Okay, thank you, and that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, and item number 5 on the agenda, to receive a pre-application presentation on proposals for the Marston Lane Frome by the Pegasus Group. Now, I guess, Hannah, you're going to have to admit.
Yeah, if Hannah could please transfer Jonathan Coombs and Andrew Simpson across to panelists so that they can give their presentation and share their screen with us.
Hello.
Good evening.
Everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I've been emailed by Andrew to advise that he's having issues with sharing his screen, so he's by phone. I don't know if by phone Andrew needs to unmute himself, or it's something that is done by your staff.
I have just clicked ask to unmute, so hopefully it should work.
Brilliant. I think that has unmuted me. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
Excellent. Okay. Hi.
Okay. If it's okay with you, I prepared a short PowerPoint presentation, and I'll share that with yourselves, and Andrew will come in and speak as and when is suitable. And then if there are any questions or queries, then we'll happily take those on board and answer as best we can. So. I can share my screen. I have disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know if access needs to be provided.
Maybe Hannah can do that.
I think
I've
Hannah's
just made you
looking.
a co-host, so hopefully that should work.
That seems to be coming along.
Hey,
right. Okay. Everyone can see that, hopefully.
Yes, we can. Good.
Grand. Okay, I'll click on and try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. And you can all get home in due course. Thank you for having us here today. And obviously, I'll come to the fact that we were here almost a year ago. I think it was the day probably with yourselves. But we're here to speak about proposals on Marston Lane within Frome. It's a proposal for a hybrid planning application for 5 self-build homes. See if it will. Yes. With you today, you have myself, Jonathan Coombs. I'm the planning consultant from Pegasus Group, representing LVA, or Land Value Alliances, who would be the applicant. We also have Andrew Simpson from MVB Architects, the appointed architects on the scheme. Just in summary, the hybrid planning application, you may well be familiar with hybrids, but just in case not, it's basically a combination of an outline application and a full application. In this case, that's specifically because it's a self-build scheme, so you have to provide service plots. So all the servicing components are the full detailed, and then the actual plots themselves are an outline, and those following details would be under reserved matters. So the notion is that you have your access road, your drainage, your supporting works in detail, and then the individual self-build plots are identified, and you'd have parameters or design code set out for each of those. And then that will come forward in a subsequent reserved matters application for each plot as the individual self-builder takes that on. So just to cap quite quickly, LVA, you may or may not be familiar with LVA, I suspect you are. They are a Somerset-based land, invest and planning project management company. So they operate across the country, but they're focused primarily in the West Country in the counties of Somerset, Dorset and Devon. LVA are a very experienced set of people, but their focus on knowledge is in the West Country. And effectively, they straddle that gap between small-scale builders who can't pick up particularly sizable projects, and the larger strategic land promoters and PLCs who aren't particularly interested in those medium-scale projects. So they present an opportunity for those mid-sized schemes. So the application site, I'm sure you're all familiar where Marston Lane is, but just in case not, here it is in the context of Frome. And this is the specific site or portion of the relevant land in question. So it's between Whitemill Farm and Marston Lane, just south of Critchell Road. So it's in that kind of little elbow along Marston Lane, Critchell Road on the edge of Frome. So just to recap, as I said, we were here a year ago. So we previously attended, and that was within your session before the public session, just for a very initial, we are looking at this site, what are your thoughts before we go and spend a bunch of money pursuing it further? And so since this time, we've had a formal pre-application inquiry with Mendip District Council. We've secured self-build registered data at the local scale specifically for Frome. And we've had various detailed technical studies completed on topography, landscape, drainage, ecology, trees and highways that will help to inform what you see today. Just to go over what Mendip District Council said to us, they haven't said a huge amount, to be honest. It's been a brief email in response, but in general terms of the principle, they've acknowledged that delivery of self-build plots weighs in favour of development when considering locations outside of the settlement boundary, because they have a statutory need to deliver self-build units. There are technical constraints that need to be addressed on any scheme, and in this particular case, they've identified the ecological considerations due to bat populations in the area, appropriate access arrangements being provided, and also the Skyline policy, which I'll come to in a second. And then in terms of the methodology for securing self-build, they would secure that through a legal agreement with service plots to be provided under the reserved matters, controlled by a design code or parameters plans. They've left that flexible to be discussed during an application. So in terms of the Skyline, we addressed this when we spoke with you, because that's obviously one of your key policies. So in terms of the Skyline policy, this is what you have in your neighbourhood plan, and this identifies the areas for this particular area of your Skyline policy. And you can see the application site is just in this corner here. We've gone back through the sort of the whys and the wherefores in terms of the landscape assessment that we had conducted, and it goes back, as acknowledged in fact in the neighbourhood plan, to a 1996 study that was carried out. This identifies sensitive landscapes, and these dashed lines here represent where the land falls away. So you can see that actually we're outside of where the land falls away there on the level land. And previously presented you with some LiDAR data, and now we've actually had a topographic survey which confirms that. So you can see, in fact, the land I think rises about 30 centimetres up here before it starts falling away, probably somewhere within this land, which we don't have access to survey. But you can see as it scoots sort of around White Mill Farm there, it's pretty level. So in terms of the self-build position, obviously you have a self-build policy within your neighbourhood plan. The district council have a legal duty to grant planning permission for service plots to reflect their self-build register. And the district council have since 2016 had 170 expressions of interest in self-build, with 67 of those specifying Frome as the preferred location, having secured that through a freedom of information request. And to date, the district council haven't in fact granted any permissions that meet the statutory definition of self-build. So they've had some schemes that purport to deliver self-build proposals, and they may well do so, but in terms of a statutory delivery of that, they're not secured because those schemes have been within settlements, so they haven't had any reason to legally require that. So there's no guarantee that they haven't subsequently been sold on or just been delivered as a standard open market development. In December 2019, just to sort of contextualize things that happened since, and I'm sure you're familiar with this in terms of your general updates and briefing, the new standard method came into effect from Ended District Council, which had the effect of uplifting the requirement for the following 5 years by approximately a further 1,000 homes. Self-build homes contribute to that, so I just thought it's important to contextualise the big picture that self-build housing is in isolation as part of the overall housing mix. And because of that, the District Council confirmed they'll be conducting a single plan review to address that, but it's very much at the inception stage. So this is what's proposed on site. I just thought I'd set out this image which has been sent to you, and it's one of the images that Andrew's compiled, and this just sort of reflects on some of the wider elements we have to deal with. So our red line, I showed it as this portion here, but actually it will extend slightly further because we've got a drainage attenuation pond here because our discharge point will be in White Mill Lane. So we need to have a routing through for that, and the attenuation pond down at the bottom slope of the slope there where it's nice and level and can easily discharge. We've also got a new hedgerow along here because there's back connectivity that seems to come down the lane here just to the south, and that there's a bit of opportunity to enhance the connectivity across the wider site. So there's just a couple of things just to sort of let you know that we're looking at the slightly bigger picture than the specific development area of the site, as it were. So this is the layout that Andrew has put forward, and it reflects some changes since we last presented to you. At this point, I'll hand over to Andrew, and hopefully he can see where we are at this point. But we're at your first layout image, Andrew, if you'd like to pick up the baton and explain how we got to where we are.
Sure, thanks for that, Jonathan. I can see everything that you're seeing as well, so the fact we're on a phone hopefully is no problem. So as Jonathan pointed out, this is 5 self-build plots, which is what we were showing before. The layout is slightly different than we'd shown before as a result of those detailed technical surveys that were undertaken. So key things to note on this plan are that we're forming a new access from Marston Lane. So we're not using the access that goes on to White Mill. That's protected. We're providing pavements running along both sides of that access, and they'll have tactile paving providing crossings to the existing pavement, which is on the eastern side of Marston Lane along through there. In terms of roads, as Jonathan said, this would be part of the detailed application, which would include a turning head. The site is quite constrained and there isn't sufficient space to provide a sort of loop, so we have to provide a turning of some description. The layouts themselves will be subject to detailed applications for each individual plot. So at this point, they are indicative house designs only. If you want to, but will be subject to detailed parameters, some of which we know now and some of which we would welcome feedback from you on. So if you could jump to the next slide. So this is a work in progress drawing. We're trying to set out what the parameters might be. So our initial thinking is that we are defining plots, so that's the red line boundaries, and build zones, that's zones within each plot that an applicant could build a dwelling. It would still be subject to them providing on-plot parking and meeting a range of other sort of constraints. So the key thing here is that we're respecting root protection zones. So that's the pale blue, the cyan colour, which is around the tree at the bottom of the site, hedgerow at the northern end of the site, and a small cluster of trees down the bottom right-hand side down through there. And as Jonathan also noted, there's a sort of potential wildlife route through the site running along the southern boundary as well. So we've got a generous offset from that boundary too. Each dwelling would include parking, and that would be in accordance with Somerset Highways standards, which is really to enable charging of electric vehicles. We're obviously in a transition period, moving away from on-street parking, where it's difficult to provide electrical vehicle charging, to a state where we need to be providing, overnight trickle charging of vehicles. So there would be some on-street parking, but that would be for visitors only. The next steps in terms of developing parameters, we'll be looking at heights within each plot, roof orientation, whether we have gables or simple roof slopes or hipped roofs. We'll be looking at materials, and that's what we'll be taking on board feedback from our landscape consultant, who's advising on where this thing might be visible from and what the impacts of the building might be. And we'll be picking up structured planting, which might be part of the sort of landscape character of either the street or the escarpment, which runs just off screen to the left through there. But we very much welcome input from yourselves on other key parameters that you think might be important for us to consider as part of our proposal. If you could jump to the next slide. We've produced a couple of concept sketches to illustrate what this thing might look like. So we've got two views. This one's from the entrance to the site. So this is Marston Lane to your left, and we're looking down towards Sainsbury's End. The dark coloured tree on the right is the really nice copper beech, which is at the entrance to the site. And as you can see, the housing is generally located on the southern side of that boundary, largely to protect the root protection area associated with that copper beech tree. So we're providing a mixture, we're showing a sort of mixture of housing reflecting the mixture that would likely result out of self-build. You've got 5 individual house builders, who are homeowners who want to build a home, and they're likely all to be a little bit different. Next view, if you could jump to that. This is an aerial view, so it's not a realistic view. It's from 15, 20 meters up above White Mill. So this is looking back towards Sainsbury's, which would be sort of top right-hand side. You've got existing buildings, which are the grey buildings, and then you've got the new buildings, which are the white buildings. So things to note out of that are that the housing on the western side of Marston Lane, which you can see to the right-hand side of the screen there, are some of which are set quite a long way back from the road. So this isn't stepping forward further than an existing sort of building line, or notional building line that runs along the backs of those plots. Again, we are trying to show a mixture of housing, and these ones are intended to sort of start to illustrate some of those codes that might relate to height and roof orientation. So we've got a sort of slightly lower 2-storey unit that fronts onto Marston Lane. We're showing units that might be slightly taller, so 2-storey, but with development within a roof space for the units in the middle of the site. And then the 2 units closest to us are showing a sort of variety of forms that might represent a sort of interest or character when viewed from the valley below. So we've got one with a gable showing, which is sort of punctuated or partially screened by trees. And then the other unit is showing as presenting a sort of roof slope, which would have probably slightly less impact just because the way the roof recedes from the viewer down in the valley. That's about it in terms of my parts. Back over to you, Jonathan.
Yep, so just to sort of go back a little bit, I think to lay out here, I think it'd just be useful to contextualise what we've had in terms of feedback. So I know the Skyline policy is one of the key elements. Is we've had input from Tyler Grange, who've gone out and carried a landscape and visual assessment of the site, or visual appraisal of the site. and they've given us inputs in terms of setbacks from the boundary, the ability to incorporate planting, so you get sort of sporadic views through, which reflects the existing characters you see of the ridge line as you look across the valley. They also looked at the viewpoints, and we'll be able to submit that information in detail as part of any application. The other input we've had is in terms of the presentation to Marston Lane itself. So obviously we've got this area here which will be opened up as an element of public open space, and I think that would be a nice benefit to Marston Lane itself. And we've shown here, we had some debate about whether to front it onto Marston Lane or into the site, but Marston Lane itself is quite diverse, but on the western side the properties tend to be set behind large hedgerows, so we'd be looking to replicate that on this particular unit here, and that's what we thought would be the best approach, but we're open obviously to considering that. We're not wedded to that approach. And in terms of the detailed design, obviously, as Andrew set out, we would envisage this having a diversity approach, because we think it would be worthwhile to celebrate the fact it would be self-build and trying to encourage some element of diversity within that. The form along Marston Lane in terms of materials and treatment, it's quite a range across Marston Lane, so we think it lends itself to that approach, so it wouldn't necessarily read as completely out of keeping with a regimented approach, for example. So we think that presents an ideal opportunity for the self-build ethos. So that covers the extra elements I wanted to cover off, and that's the end of my presentation. As I said, hopefully it's relatively short and allows you to get on with things. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask away and we'll answer as best we can.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, Andrew. If you could stop sharing your screen, Jonathan.
Yep.
So I can see everybody. Thank you. Great. Any questions? I've got Anita, Mark, and then Jane first.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. That was really quite an excuse me, quite an insight. Two things really. I'm just wondering what requirement there would be for any plot owner to build houses with energy saving features or solar panels, whatever. Is there anything like that built into the instruction when someone buys a plot? And also, when they have a plot of land, is there any requirement for them to make space for garden, or are they eligible to build on the entire space to actually build a house? I mean, what are the restrictions for plot owners?
Yep, so there's two elements there. So you've asked in terms of the format of any detailed reserved matter proposal, that would be a reserved matter stage, but what would likely happen is the council would secure the context of that at outline stage. So it would be much like a full application in terms of energy saving features, energy efficiency measures. So that would likely be set with by condition by the council. The exact format of how it would be regulated hasn't yet been fixed, and the council were fairly open-minded about that in their pre-application response. So it might be it all be included within a design code that be secured for each individual plot on the Section 106 agreement, or it may be in condition, and we'll negotiate that as part of the actual application with the council. But those would certainly be elements I would expect to be controlled to some degree in accordance with the council's policies. In terms of the garden sizes and what have you, so those build zones that Andrew set out, that's kind of a first stab at what a parameter plan may well look like for each of those plots. What we would anticipate is that to a certain degree, the constraints of each of those parcels define the minimum size of garden that one would have in any case. So we've got a 4 metre offset from the hedge line for ecology reasons. We've got offsets from the trees that Andrew mentioned as well. And that will set out a reasonable amount of garden space. Within that, it then becomes an argument as to what size those prospective purchasers may want to choose and what the council may wish to enforce in terms of future residential amenity standards for those property owners, because it's not just them, it's the people who then come after them as well. But ultimately, I would hope in this scenario, the person building their house would be designing it. So they would be designing it to a standard that one would hope that they would find acceptable. So to a certain extent, I expect to be somewhat self-governing, although the council may have a certain approach they would wish us to specifically state within the design parameters for each of those plots. And again, that's something that we would finesse as part of the application. But if anybody has any specific thoughts on those types of things, I'm aware it's quite detailed and a bit sort of crystal ball exercise, we're all ears, because this is, it's not a well-rehearsed approach, particularly on a sort of a small scale site like this. So, we're happy to sort of take all that feedback in and try and incorporate that as much as possible within the final submission.
Thank you. It just almost makes sense from my layman's point of view to build in some of those restrictions to plots before they're bought, that there are certain conditions under which they're bought. But does that make life too difficult then to sell?
There is probably a kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation with that, in terms of it may impact that, but those parameters can also help define the relationship with the surrounding properties as well. So we need to be recognise that it's a homogenous whole, and it's not each individual parcel in isolation as well. So obviously LVA will be looking to make sure they can, I think the key thing for them will be making sure they can sell the units, the plots quickly, because it is a self-build scheme. So it's advantageous to have all of those come forward as one in an ideal world, but aware that's not necessarily the reality. So that is something that we'll have to take into consideration, and I suspect it will be something that the council will have an opinion on, and we'll agree on a specific approach with them.
Thank you very much.
Mark, did you have?
Thank you. 2 quick points. Thank you for this. Very interesting. If you want to see something that does show up on the skyline in that area, then look across from the Ridgeway towards Critchhill, and you'll see the development, Yeoman's Lodge, which has gardens leading down across the escarpment there, which is quite obvious from a long way away. It's not unpleasant development, but it really is on the edge of the escarpment there, and you can see it from some way away. So any amelioration with planting is probably good. My biggest concern is going to be traffic. Marston Lane is becoming more and more of a rat run, and LVA, with the best intention in the world, will be contributing that if their current development we discussed last night ever gets off the ground. Highways will advise you, I take it, on access onto Marston Lane, but you are within one house width to Critchhill Road itself. And I'm really concerned about the potential for, it's difficult enough to pull out into Marston Lane at the moment, and people do belt along there. If you put the hedge on Marston Lane to continue the hedge line with that one house which fronts onto Marston Lane, that will prove even more of a hindrance to motorists entering or exiting your development. So I know highways will pin you down on that, but I'm very concerned about that. There's already incidents there very often, and it needs looking at.
We're very much aware that highway issues are one of the key points of feedback that the council had on this specific site. Just to be clear, that hedgerow will be set behind a new pavement, so that would account for visibility displays based on what would be observed traffic speeds in the area. So that's been accounted for within the design. So the hedgerow would kind of have I guess a dog leg to it at the terminus of the site, although you've got the field gate, haven't you, for the lane just south of it. So there'll be kind of that type of arrangement at that specific point, but the visibility display is designed to account for adequate access arrangements.
Yeah, and so you've got this piece of land which you'll call public amenity. My view of it is that would be a driveway into your development, the piece of public amenity land, and then the back garden of the house, which is on the corner of Critchhill Road. And I don't know if that's too close to too many roads and too obscuring. It's I know the devil will be in the detail, but it's something I do want to flag up at a very early stage.
Muted. Thanks, Mark. Jane.
Thank you. I've got a quick question, and then I see there are a couple on the Q&A board as well, which perhaps will allow people to ask. So presumably this is coming forward as an exception site, because it's outside of the development boundary. So in order to comply with Mendic's exception policy, it would need to be affordable housing. But then in the neighbourhood plan, we've got our exception policy for self-build. I've I've just gone back and checked the wording in the neighbourhood plan, and that refers to any housing being built under that policy, sort of being community housing, and either done by a community land trust or in some way to remain affordable in perpetuity. So I'm just wondering, you know, are you proposing that these houses will be affordable? How is that going to work?
Yeah, that's a very important question. It's one that we've asked explicitly of the council itself. So yeah, there's two elements there. So there's amended district council's policy, which obviously it doesn't technically allow exception sites outside of or self-build sites outside of the main towns. So it's kind of in contrast to the neighbourhood plan policy as well. But there's sort of a bigger statutory position. So the council have a legal duty to provide self-build plots. Yep. They have that defined in statutes. That is a material planning consideration. They don't do that. That's simple observance of fact. And the housing officer, we've had discussions with them. They've also acknowledged that their housing policy with regards to self-build is kind of a bit of a fudge. So what they didn't want to do is they didn't want self-build to compete with exception sites. So they tried to kind of tie in self-build with affordable, which I must admit as a professional planning consultant, I find somewhat curious, because I'm not sure how many people on the affordable housing waiting list have hundreds of £1,000s in their back pocket to invest in building a house. And then what we've done as a result of that is, because we're aware of those policies, we asked for the Froome or the self-build register data explicitly for Froome. Within that, there is 0 affordable housing interest. In fact, within the whole authority, there's 2 out of those 170 expressions of interest for affordable housing. None of them are in Froome. So we're aware that's an issue, and effectively we just have to be upfront about it and acknowledge that it's a planning balance issue, because the council have this legal duty. We're here to provide them opportunity for self-build units, but there's no interest expressed on the register, so there's no ability for us to respond to a demand that's expressed for self-build affordable units, because it's simply not acknowledged as there. So we're proposing it as a market scheme, as a reflection of that. I'm aware that's not a neat sort of hand in glove position, but that's the reality of the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, can we just, there's a couple of questions from the attendees. Can we do those first and then come back to you? Or
can I just follow on from that question? It's related to that point, actually. Related to affordable. Firstly, I'm quite surprised that there's no expressions of affordable self-build on the register. I mean, I know for a fact there is considerable interest in Froome for people to self-build affordably. And my question really is, as a kind of I can't think what the word is, you know, kind of a gesture, I guess, to the town. I know you don't have to provide anything affordable, but would you consider 1 out of the 5 houses as being affordable? And that could be done perhaps by the land being held in trust, and the self-builder perhaps pays ground rent rather than actually have to buy the plot. That's it.
That's something I have to discuss with LVA. As I say, we've done some research, as I said, in terms of what the expressed interest is, and so obviously what they put forward has to respond to that, and they've had professional advice about valuing it, because obviously it's a much more difficult item to value, because you know the standard valuation exercise is to look at what's sold of a similar fashion in the area, and there isn't to review, so it makes it quite a difficult commercial prospect to comprehend. But I'll ask the question of LVA, and we'll review that position, but I can't offer you any guarantees today, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks. Jane, do we have some questions from attendees?
I'm muted. Still, no, I'm unmuted. Okay, I was just wondering whether you wanted to invite Helen to ask her question directly.
Yes, yeah. Let's go.
Yes, hello there, thank you. At the moment, what I've put is that when I go down Marston Lane, which I do, as I go past this point, I put it's a welcome relief from the continuous ribbon of urban development. it's a public view. It's kind of like a public asset. And by building on here, what we're kind of doing is privatizing that public asset and making it unavailable. And of course, as you go further down, if you can see over the hedgerow, you'd also get a lovely view. You get glimpses of a lovely view. It's nice, particularly if you're walking. I just wonder if, you know, to compensate for that, if this gets the go-ahead, could the two houses that are at the end of the access road be spaced a bit further apart? I know there's going to be a balance to be struck because you're going to be doing landscaping so that this won't be seen from across the valley from the other side. But I'm just wondering if it's a small point, whether it could, you know, still be an asset for people to be looking at it as well from the road.
It's a very good question, Helen, and we had that exact debate within the project team, in fact, with the landscape consultant and Andrew and myself and LVA. So we had a discussion about the pros and cons and how to balance that, because as you say, we're balancing the views from across the valley and trying to put planting for that intermittent view, and that's one of the things to keep us feedback from the study that was conducted by Tyler Grange, alongside the opportunities in terms of the glimpse view across the site that's currently there. Essentially, we came to the conclusion that you could try to engineer it, but it would be a very narrow glimpse view, and it might be preferable to try and soften that space with some landscaping within the scheme. But we're open to trying that approach in terms of trying to encourage low-level planting and some view through. What we're mindful of is, at the end of the day, those properties will be residential properties, and there'll be, whilst there can be restrictions through the planning process in terms of permitted development rights for boundary treatments and such, I would expect those to have some degree of enclosures to maintain the privacy of the rear gardens. And we'd need to take a considered view as to the value of what that would offer, because it would be a narrow sort of channel, and how that would be achieved, and how that then competes with the view up the slope from the other side, from more distant views. So it's something we're open to. It just seemed to us in the round to be a somewhat challenging exercise to secure with rather limited benefit in the round. But as I said, we're open to that, and it's, you know, it's a sort of a debate to be had.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Jane, from the?
There's another one from Andy Jones, which is a bit more straightforward. Perhaps I can read it. So who would own and maintain the public open space that is proposed to the right of the entrance? And what prevents the homeowners from securing that space for their private usage?
So that space, we would envisage that being part of a small private management company that would manage those spaces, and the as well as the drainage operation to the point of adoption and all the other sort of bits and pieces that come with the development site. Whether that could be adopted by Mendip or Froome, if the Town Council were willing to do so, that would be a debate we'd be happy to enter into. What would happen if it was a private management company, because the intention would be for it to be public, is that that could be secured through Section 106 agreement on any eventual consent. So that is something that the council has powers to secure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Rich, and then John.
Just a quickie. When you last spoke to us, it's looking a lot more developed as an idea. Quite like it. Like the idea of self-build. Were you looking at more houses on that site before, or was it always 5? I can't remember.
So yes, previously there'd been promotion for the site for the small parcel of land to the north as well under previous local plan iterations. And before Pegasus Group were involved with the site, LVA had a withdrawn scheme for a larger quantum of development on the site as part of that promotion exercise. That's fallen away, and so it's no longer being pursued at the current time.
So do you think that will come forward at some later time?
I can't possibly say, to be honest with you. I don't know. It's not within my instruction. So all we have before us are the 5 units.
Okay.
John?
No, it's just to say I like the presentation. I've learned a lot actually, and it's good that your engagement has gone on for so long. I feel that's really positive. So I'm in favor of this self-build thing. I don't have any questions, just a comment. I really appreciate the level of information you've provided.
Great, thanks, John. Anything else? Any other questions? No. Okay. Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Andrew. Interesting presentation. I think as a council we very much we like self-build. I think we'll have a chat, and if there's any other further questions or comments, we'll get back to you via Jane, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item number 5 on the agenda. No, item number 6 on the agenda. To consider major plan applications received in Appendix 1. Jane, what are we discussing first? Number 3?
I think first we will discuss number 390 on our list, which is 16 Westway, Frome. The description is the creation of a new entrance and fire escape and the addition and refurbishment of windows. And bear with me, I'm going to try and share my screen.
That's horribly wrong.
Yep, it's gone horribly wrong.
You need to be a co-host, don't you?
I think I probably yeah, I think that it's because I have got a second screen and sometimes that throws it out. So just apologies to all. Let's try that again.
Has everybody looked at the plans for this while Jane's doing? Any initial comments? I must admit, I thought I didn't even realise there was an upper floor to that bit, I have to admit. So I thought it was quite good.
It's absolutely huge upstairs. It's about as big, well, it's obviously as big as the ground floor of Argos, and that goes back a long way as well.
I thought it was quite a nice use of a brick wall, quite frankly. Lizzie?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we always talk about is the lack of commercial space in the centre of Frome, and something that's going to open up commercial space right in the centre of Frome seems to be sensible.
Yeah,
yeah. And it makes that bit of Cork Street a bit more alive.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can all see that now, having fixed the problem. So yes, I should explain that actually, if you can see my cursor, the proposed new entrance is on what is currently the blank wall here. This here is the current walkway through, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And above the unit that was previously Argos, there is a second floor. And that is just completely underutilized, and the proposal is by putting in this new doorway and additional fenestration here, you will be able to access that unit via this entrance. On the plans, they've actually shown the layout of a gym. The gym, they've only done that just to indicate how it could be used. They're not saying that that's the final end use, but it is a big space, and you know, I think it's great if we can provide some more commercial and employment space within that unit. The issues that have been raised specifically by the Civic Society, that they have a feel, well, they've described the Westway as being iconic, and they feel that the window and doorway is actually too big. One of the reasons being that opposite, on the other side of the road, you actually have listed buildings, and they feel that that detracts from the setting of the listed building, and some more sort of particular concerns about the height of the top of the lettering here. And they also pointed out that the fact that this says Westway here kind of implies that that's the entrance into the Westway centre itself, but actually it will still be here, and this will be the entrance into the floor above. So I just thought it was worth pointing out their comments on that to you. And then you can see the new fire exit that will have to be installed on the car park elevation. Clearly, because of the additional floor, they need to ensure that they meet the relevant regulations. So hopefully that helps, just showing that to you. Just be interested to hear your comments, really.
Right, I've got lots. I've got Anne, Mark, Rich, and then John. Kick off with.
My question would be: would there be any restriction on what sort of commercial use it could be put to? Could it be a nightclub? Would we want it to be a nightclub, or would it be restricted? Not be a restaurant, or would there be restrictions on what it could be?
So the restrictions would come under the use classes, and the use classes have recently changed regarding what needs planning permission to change from one use to another. There's actually more flexibility been built into that. I think that a nightclub, she said, trying to find a little piece of paper.
Don't make people don't know, Jane. You know all the nightclubs around. Come on.
Charming. There aren't any anymore. So a nightclub would actually fall into a use all of its own, sui generis. So it would need specific permission to be a nightclub. But in terms of it being a retail outlet or a gym, office use, those would be interchangeable. So certainly, as they've said in their documentation, a gym actually wouldn't require a change of use. So it's only the alterations to the building that they're actually applying for permission for. I would imagine that a use that would go in there would fall within the relevant use class.
But it couldn't be light industrial or anything particularly noisy or anything like that.
No.
Okay, great. Mark?
I think it's ironic that the Civic Society say the Westway is iconic, because they spent quite a bit of time slagging off before. It was iconic when the Gaumont Cinema and Scott's Garage were there, but they went in favour of the red brick building. I support this. I think it's a great use of the underused space above, which was Argos. If I do empathise with anything that they say, is I think that with that door and window does look a bit big at the moment, and there would be a lot of light pollution going on to Cork Street, opposite Monmouth House and Brown and Vautier. That might not be a great thing. We could obviously mitigate that. I think the gym idea has probably come from a previous application when they were going to put a 24-hour gym above what is now Coffee Number 1. They wanted to do that above there, that was going to be going for some time as a 24-hour gym. So whether or not they're just rehashing that idea or not, I don't know. But as you say, there's no firm proposal to put a 24-hour gym in there. But I do support the use of the building in a much better way than it has been used in the past. Great.
Thanks, Mark. I got Rich.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Mark said, actually. I think it's a great idea. Love it. Well, I support it. I don't understand that it's an iconic building. Don't get that at all. It's just a pile of red bricks. Be much better with this on the side of it. Like it, totally. I do take the point about the Westway. Could be misleading. Call it Westway upstairs or something.
I would guess whoever takes over the lease will put their sign where it says Westway and put their logo.
I think it's a really good idea.
Weatherspoons.
John.
Yeah, no, it was just to echo exactly what Mark and Rich have said. Iconic, I choked. Really? And I think it's a great, whatever, and whatever they want to do in there, I think, it'll be a good thing. It's a commercial space. If they can make it successful and more amenity for Frome, fantastic.
Yeah.
I have no objection whatsoever.
Great, thank you. Paul.
Just to defend the Civic Society comments, I understand why they say it's iconic. I mean, we might not like it. It's a very particular architectural style. That the Westway. It's not very nice, particularly as a style, perhaps, and most people probably don't like it. But it is very what's the word? Kind of unique. Well, not unique at all, but it's it's a particular style, and this
vernacular.
Yeah, well, not vernacular, and this will change that, obviously. But having said that, I support the proposal. I do think, like as Mark said, I think maybe the entranceway, the atrium is maybe overly large, and the signage is overly large. But other than that, I think it's great use of that space.
Yeah, Lizzie, and then Anita, full house.
Just looking through the documents and wondering also, assuming this becomes some sort of space that is visited and occupied and used by a decent number of people, there's nothing really associated with it about travel. There's mention of additional cycle storage to encourage sustainable transport, but there's not really any kind of detail in there on that. And, Cork Street is kind of busy enough, and Cork Street car park is, very busy enough. So I was interested. Sometimes we see travel plans and sometimes we don't, and I wasn't sure if that was appropriate in this situation, or if that comes with whatever the use is and the occupant decides to do with it.
Jane.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the kind of application that would require a travel plan. It's a town centre use, and I think it's sort of taken as read that anybody travelling to the town centre will use the car parks there. We hope that they would walk, but no, there's no requirement for a travel plan. And I did forget to mention, I think they said something, they were installing a photovoltaic array on the roof, which will feed into the development, and any excess will feed back into the grid. So
that bit is fab. I love that bit, obviously. But anything that is about kind of how people are moving in and out of the town centre and the transport modes they're using is obviously kind of, it's a permanent topic of discussion. So yeah.
I've got Anita and then Paul.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I love the idea of it being used for commercial space. I think that's absolutely great. And I do appreciate that the suggested doorway might be rather large. I get that. But actually, if you start to reduce that doorway size, I was just looking at the other plans for windows. If for a building of that size, I was just going to question whether or not that would be enough light getting in, because the windows don't seem that large other than the proposed doorway.
Fair point. Thank you. And Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I pick up on what Lizzie was saying about travel and things. I forgot to say that, they do show additional bike parking on Cork Street from what I think there's, at the moment, there's about 2 or 3 spaces, and they're showing about, I can't remember now, 7, 8 maybe. But I think it would be really great if they were covered bicycle spaces. So they would actually be encouraging people generally to the town centre to become on their bicycles, even if they're not coming to that particular building. I think that would be a great gesture.
Yep, very good point. Any other questions? Jane?
It's not a question as such. I was just sort of taking all the feedback into account. I'm wondering if you'd like me to propose a suggested response.
Yes, please.
So we fully support the proposals to use the first floor. However, we feel that the new doorway entrance is too big, and may potentially impact on, forgotten the names of the buildings on the other side of the road. and that we would like to see the cycle storage covered. Anything else to add to
Ken
that?
House and Monmouth House.
Yeah, Monmouth House.
And Ken House, which I think was where Brown and Vortier are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sort of feel obliged to say something because I'm the only person who hasn't, but I've agreed with everybody, so that's it.
Have a night off, you're isolating.
So is somebody happy to propose that?
Yeah, I'll propose it. No. Okay, Mark proposing and second by Sheila. And all those in favour? Thank you very much.
Unanimous, thank you.
Excellent. What's the next one, Jane? 393, I'm guessing?
Yeah, do bear with me because I shut my second screen down to be able to share my other screen. I've just lost my notes. So I wondered if you wanted to discuss 25, the marketplace, which is to convert what is currently was the festival, Froome Festival office. Do you want to talk about that one?
Anybody? Does anybody want to talk about? Rich and Sheila?
I just have a quick question. I'm a bit confused. Is it just the corner?
It's the upper
the whole
floor.
thing?
No, it's upstairs above the opticians. So it's not the corner, it's the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Sorry.
I don't need a full discussion. It is the whole building. It is an iconic building. I don't object to the lights, the skylights, whatever at the top, the Velux. I think that's fine. I pretty much agree, I think, with the Civic Society comments, which are about the size of the rooms. Apparently, they're just below what's now a sort of legal minimum or recommended minimum. So that would be my main concern. And the bins, where do the bins go? So I think there's possibly a little bit more thought required around that. But other than that, I mean, fine.
Yep. Thanks, Rich. Sheila.
I was going to say the same, so I won't repeat that. But and also, I've got a note here that they were going to remove the ironworks around the window at the top. Is that right?
That's what it shows on the plan.
Because that is, that building was Singer's building originally. That was where he had his watchmaking shop. So I would, and those are Singer, iron workings. So I would query whether that should happen, simply because it is part of our heritage, and I would have said that they should remain, and the tiling that's around there. So I don't understand why they would want to remove that ironwork, and I would say I would recommend that it remains, and yeah, that's it.
Sorry, I just landed my screen share on you.
Oh, yeah, I can see. Yeah.
So
well,
this
I really don't
existing.
see why it doesn't sort of need to happen. I don't think it's particularly damaged, is it? And I think that should be queried.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't actually noticed that, Sheila. Thank you for pointing that out. I agree with you.
I assumed it was something to do with the fact that it's becoming residential and not an office space, but because they don't want, obviously, people to use it as a balcony, presumably.
No, but it is part of the original architecture, and it was made by Singer. So
yeah,
I think
I agree. Yeah.
And we had the fuss about removing the St. Eldon's crest from the railings just opposite. I think this is marginally more important.
It's way older.
Okay, so I would just suggest a response.
Hold on.
Oh,
I think
sorry.
Daisy wants to
Sorry,
say
it was a late hand. I wanted to check something. I just wanted to check because we've had similar proposals before from buildings on Marketplace, which are office space, and have said we want to convert to residential. And we've said, hang on, we need office space and we need commercial space in the centre of town. And so Jane can explain to me that why this is different. It's possibly because it's a reinstatement of how it was, you know. But
there's new permitted development that's come into force, and actually offices on first and second floors don't always require consent to be used for residential now, but because this is a listed building, that does away with the permitted development, but actually the regulations allow for it to be used as a residential property. So yes, I mean, you are right. Normally we would be saying that.
I'm just not up to date on my regulations.
Well, no, and it's difficult to keep up with. Having been in the festival office, it is quite tiny and is in need of some love. But listening to the comments that you've all fed back, so we are concerned about the size of the unit, that it may not be in line with the size standards, concerned about where bins and storage will be, and we also don't want to see the loss of the ironwork to the front of the bay window.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody like to propose that for me? Oh, sorry, Steve, I thought you were going to do that bit.
You just did.
No, I'm saying who proposed it.
Okay, right. Sheila, thank you. And John, second, and all those in favour.
Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay.
And next, Locks Hill, so 95 Locks Hill. This is for the demolition of the existing building and the erection of 7 dwelling houses, probably better known to you all as the former Locks Hill surgery. I will share a plan with you in just a moment. So some of us actually attended a pre-application site visit here and met with the agents. We fed back to them at the time that we were concerned about potential overlooking at the bottom of the site. You'll remember that there is actually quite a significant drop in levels on the site, and when you get to the rear of the site, actually the land is at such a level that you can look down into the gardens of the properties that are already in there. And by putting housing up, particularly at the bottom there, we were concerned that there would be significant overlooking. We also said that we felt that there was a lack of imagination in the design, and that we were frustrated that the green space is relegated to private backyards, and that the view from the front window of a house would basically be a car park, and that perhaps they could do something imaginative with the road services to make the road a bit more into shared space. The Civic Society have again feel that that the building that is currently there, the former surgery, is a building that's worthy of retention due to its design. And they've also pointed out that they feel there should have been a marketing exercise to see whether or not there was any interest in the existing building to retain it for a community use. And I will now try and show you the plans.
Paul, have you got any comments on the design of the old surgery?
Yeah, they haven't changed really. I mean, the old surgery. Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
actually,
just following on from what the Civic Society said, I don't know,
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it is it's a nice building. It's it's an interesting late 20th century building. I'm surprised it's actually only built in about 1996 or something, so it's not very old. So yeah, I mean, I think that for the pre-application was that I would probably support its removal and to build something else if the proposal was something really interesting. But unfortunately it isn't. So I think personally, I think we should, they'd be better off keeping that existing building. But
Yeah.
I think, I agree with the Civic Society in that
Thanks.
sense.
Yeah, no, it's just, what they said about the old building, that was, I just wondered if you had any views. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now. So the entrance off of Locks Hill is at the top here, and what's happened there? This area here is approximately where the existing surgery is, and then the two proposed houses at the end here were the ones where we had the particular concerns over the overlooking the properties which aren't shown surrounding here. And then yes, and you can see there does seem to be quite an expansive tarmac for the road and parking spaces there. So that's that. Do you want me to show you any of the plans of the elevations, or are you happy that you've seen those?
Isn't it a load of tarmac now anyway?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would echo the idea that this is not the most special building in the whole entire world, but take the point.
Jane, what is there Somerset County Council rules on number of parking spaces? Is that still set in stone, or
yes?
Is that...
Yeah, there are, and it's for a 3-bedroom property. I think it's 2.5 parking spaces. Please don't ask me how you get half a parking space. I've never been able to explain it, and it appears that actually they're not providing sufficient number of parking spaces for the amount of housing that's proposed, and have heard from residents, obviously they would be concerned about where that additional parking would go. There's already a problem in the area of parking, and actually before, when it was a surgery, people used the parking associated with the surgery if they were popping to the pharmacy next door to pick up their prescriptions and so on, or in the evenings perhaps to just park their cars. So there is a concern there as well.
Thanks. Okay, I've got Anne and then Sheila at the moment.
I was just going to comment on the fact I drove past it, I think the day before yesterday, and there were 2 cars using the entrance, the small entrance with the big white metal gates, and they were actually parking there. So there is a problem with parking at the moment. So that will get worse.
Yeah. Thanks. Sheila?
I just wanted to reiterate what an incredibly unimaginative and really boring plan it seems to be, and there doesn't seem to be any of the sort of things that we've been asking for in terms of sustainability or traffic, amelioration or anything like that. I just was really shocked to really look at this and think this is just not a good plan. And I would have thought it was very. I'm astonished that someone can do this and not make many changes. It's extraordinary. I would object to it, to be honest.
Thanks, Sheila. Anyone else got any comments? I've got Lizzie.
Just to echo Sheila's point on sustainability, I was just looking again at the planning portal, just to see if I'd missed a document, because I might. And there's nothing that is saying to me what their ambitions are about the environmental sustainability of the site, the energy performance of the site, any of the sorts of features that we talk about in these meetings as being things that appeal to us. And there's the issue of the just lack of imagination in the design overall. So yeah.
Thanks. Hannah.
We've got 2 comments in the question and answer box. One's from Helen Kay that says it's not all concrete and tarmac. Quite a lot of it is green space and wildflowers. And again, the view from the road is a public asset. Furthermore, the fact that it's such a new development means that the demolish it is a waste of resources and not sustainable development. And John Clark has commented to say, is it not about maximising profits?
Yeah, probably is. Any other questions? I think we're sort of...
There's a comment from Andy Jones there as well, by the way.
Can't see that.
It's conceptually, surely it's better to have a few smallish new homes than have 2 or 3 executive properties. Right. Yeah, I've kind of, it doesn't fire my imagination, the proposal. I don't particularly object either. So I think it would have been nice to probably do something with the old building, but I don't really feel strongly about it.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
I just wanted to add my voice to Sheila's, really, that I think we should object. I agree with Helen that, you know, it's a shame to knock down a building which is only 25 years old. But as I said, I think it would be, it's a potentially a really interesting opportunity to do something fantastic with a site like this. So maybe one could justify it then, but the proposals are really uninteresting and uninspiring. And I think because of that, I think we should object. I mean, I know we can't necessarily object. That's not really great planning terms to object on, but if we can object in some way, I think we should.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we sort of welcome more housing, but at the same time, the housing there doesn't actually tick any of the boxes that we've set out as our sort of core principles, is the way I see it, in terms of, as Lizzie and Sheila said, in terms of sustainability. I don't know, to me they're neither affordable or sort of, it sort of falls in between the gaps. You know, it's that they're not affordable housing, which would be great. At the same time, they're just sort of, how many houses can you get on a plot? It's a shame, from when we saw it back in the spring or the summer, I can't remember where, it hasn't really changed a great deal from the comments that we made then. I think that's the most disappointing thing, really. Jane,
can I suggest a response?
Yeah.
So the same as we fed back to them, actually, when we responded, that we feel that it's an unimaginative design, missed opportunity for something special on this site. The concerns about the overlooking that we already raised with them, and the possibility of doing something more imaginative with the parking area being more of a shared space. Raised concern over the fact that actually there's no information about the sustainability measures for the site. And there was one other thing which I think I've missed. Or was that it? Maybe that was it.
That's it.
Does that sound like a reasonable response?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. It does. Can I get someone to propose that? Thank you, John. And someone to second? Thanks, Anita. And all those in favour? Great.
And that's unanimous, thank you.
Thanks for that.
So Jane, Helen Kay has just popped in the Q&A about the view. If you...
Oh yes. Would Helen like to speak, if that's okay with everyone?
Yep.
No, it was only when you were saying there was one other thing.
Yes, right.
When you originally read it out, I thought you said something about the view being something that was valued by local people or something like along those lines. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
But you've already voted on it now, so
yeah. Do you want to incorporate that in as part of the response?
Yes.
Okay. Afraid we're going to have to vote on that again.
Right. Okay, I propose that we do agree that in response. Thanks, Rich, for seconding. All those in favour?
And that's unanimous again. Thank you. Okay, let me just see what we have next, if there were any. So there has been some concern raised by a neighbour on the application for 6 Beechwood Close, if you'd like to discuss that one. So this is for the erection of a 2-storey extension on the rear elevation. And there does appear to be the potential for some loss of amenity next door. But I feel that this can only be confirmed by a site visit, which would be carried out by the Mendip's case officer. And perhaps we could ask them to check that whilst they're on site. Does anybody need me to share that plan if they aren't familiar with it?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is everybody happy to agree that as a response? So the potential for the loss of amenity to next door, but this can only be confirmed whilst on site, and would ask the case officer to check this.
Yeah. Right. Someone propose that, please. John again, and seconded by Rich. And all those in favour?
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Paul, you had to.
Yeah, I'm not voting on that one.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I declared interest.
Barring Paul. Okay, thank you. And then I hadn't actually highlighted any others that were necessarily needed discussion, unless anybody else has any that they would specifically like to raise.
Helen Kay's asked about the dairy.
Yes.
Okay, let me just find that one for you.
Before we get to the dairy, I'd just like to comment on numbers 395 and 398, which was 38 Weymouth Road. The first application is to fill in a non-original window on the front facade, which I thought made it look really quite nice, I have to admit. And the second application was the demolition of garage. I noticed that the garage has got an asbestos roof. Is that something that should be highlighted? Or would they automatically make sure that any asbestos removal conforms to current building regs?
I think John's got a question.
Sorry, John, didn't see that.
I live on Weymouth Road, so that was one of my questions. But also, for me, it's just a confusion because it's one of those old set of garages with contiguous roofs. So I don't know how they're going to separate it, but it's an issue for the neighbor as well. So I want to make sure the neighbor gets consulted about that aspect. They're going to be cutting asbestos and the liability that they might incur because of that.
Thanks, John.
Sorry, bear with me. I've lost my documents again. Here we go. So item number 402 on our list. So it's the Saputo Dairy UK are the applicants, Marston Trading Estate, and it's an extension to increase the size and usability of their existing washroom. Clearly, having access to the washroom is important at the best of times, but they're saying in their accompanying statements that they need to ensure that this is much better, obviously under the current circumstances. I couldn't actually see any issues with it myself, but if anybody needs me to share the plans, I can do that.
I wonder if Helen, did you want to say something on this one?
Yes. Yeah. Can I just say something? Which is that about a month ago, Scott Ward sent me an email and various other people about the fact that at the dairy they were taking down trees at the back, and he was worried that they were trying to clear the back. And anyway, I went onto Google Map. I was on the phone to Bo Walsh at Mendip to find out what was going on with the trees. And I had a look on Google Maps. It used to be a sort of continuous line of trees which came up Little Keyford Lane, if you count the hedgerow opposite the bungalows, which is quite a big hedgerow now, across the junction there where you turn into the industrial estate. There was a sort of line of trees around the back, down the back of the dairy, round the back of the co-op, all the way down to Lower Keyford, where the gardens could even say it was a green infrastructure, really, for wildlife corridors, that sort of thing. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. I'll keep going. And what the dairy owner has done is he's already taken out some of the trees at the back of where Scott lives. And he is now, I think, as part of this extension of the dairy to build this washroom, planning to take out 4 more trees. Now, I need to double check on it, but I think there are 4 trees there and at least 2 of them have got to come out. If you actually turn in from, if you're going from the co-op and then you're going towards Tool and Gauge and turn into the Marsden estate, on the right-hand side, there are some trees that are on the pavement there, and they've completely chopped down the side of the trees. There's only like half trees. They've been cut in half because I think that the dairy just sees trees as being a nuisance. And my only concern is I don't think that we can turn it down, or you can turn it down, or a planning board can turn it down on those grounds. But we all say that we're worried about losing trees, and I'm just wondering if those plans could be amended somehow to ensure that there was no loss of trees, and that could just be an advisory note that you might wish to make to that as in response to that application. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Helen.
Hi, Helen. I was part of those emails as well you were just talking about. I hadn't realised it was the same complex, but as far as this application goes, I did spot, I think there are 4 trees, 2 of which are semi-mature birch trees, as they're called. And it's a shame that they're going. They've promised to plant other trees elsewhere, but I think it would be nice to put a footnote that says something along the lines of, can we make sure it's a adequate sized tree and equivalent of what's been lost, sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I've got Anne and then Lizzie making comments.
Hi, just on I think it's Mount Pleasant at that point, just on the roadside of the Saputo dairy is a small row of really nice cottages, and I think they might be listed, I'm not sure. And my concern is I can't work out from the orientation of it where the washroom is in relation to those cottages, and I would just be concerned about additional noise for the residents of those cottages in that row.
Okay, thanks. And Lizzie?
I shall read something which is from the Saputo website, because why not? As a leading dairy manufacturer, we are determined to play an active role in mitigating and adapting to the effects of climate change, reducing waste and looking after our natural resources. So I will send the link so that can go in the minutes, and we can encourage them to live up to their environmental promise, and ask them as a large global corporation what they're going to do to sort of mitigate some of this and perhaps support wider work in the community.
Excellent. Yeah, totally agree. Someone else had a question. I saw a hand and it's gone. Jane. Yes, Jane. Sorry.
So just going to say to Helen, really, I totally understand about not wanting to lose the trees. I think, as she said, it might be quite difficult because this isn't a conservation area and the trees are not protected. Actually, it's difficult to get them to retain them, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't make that request. It's difficult to answer Anne's question, really, about whether it will have any noise impacts on those properties.
Would you mind, can you bring up Street View?
Yeah.
And we can just look at those cottages, and you'll see what I mean. They're really nice cottages with a great big dairy right behind them.
Okay, just talk amongst yourselves while I do that.
So Helen's put in the Q&A that they've said in the application that they are meters away from the houses, so it should be okay.
I'm not sure Street View will work on that bit, but
Yeah, okay. Now all I've got to do is share my screen.
Oh, Helen thinks she's read that.
Okay. So this is the Saputo building. Is it these cottages you're concerned about?
There's no point me pointing at my screen because you can't see me pointing, can you? So you see where the corner of Manor Road and Mount Pleasant is?
Go up.
That's where there's two red cars, those two red cars. So there's an L shape, and those are the cottages that I'm talking about. So yes, those are the cottages. So on Street View, if you see the front elevation of those are really quite lovely cottages. But it looks like from that view that
So if we come around, I think the trees are in the way.
Those trees there? No, they're the ones that are in half.
And what they have there at the moment is a great big, I think, temporary structure, but it's been there for years. That's like a great big marquee behind that wooden fence there.
Is that it? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, instead of that, or as well as that, all of that space is filled in. Oh, I think it is there on the left hand side, but all of that space is filled in with a great big marquee.
So can I speak?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was like, I'm really typing away because I didn't know I was part of the conversation. I thought I was still locked out. So in the picture that away there.
Your internet's not playing ball, Helen. She's gone.
Yeah, if you go down the street again, can you hear me? Go back to the left. That's it. Now you can see the trees on the right hand side there. They're the ones he's going to take out.
Please.
No, that bit on the corner there. The owner of the last of that row of cottages has actually acquired that land from Somerset County Council. So that is that little piece fenced in with the wooden rail fence there. That is owned by that cottage, that end cottage.
That's not the bit I was referring to, but never mind. Yeah.
That bit.
Yes.
No, that's not the bit I'm referring to either.
Oh, okay.
Down the street a bit and then look behind the cottages, and that's where he wants to take the trees out. But if you go back to the Google map, and you can look down on the trees from above as well.
These here, Helen?
Right, so if you look at the junction of the road, that's it there, you just touch them.
Yeah.
Right, those ones there, those trees there are the ones that I think may have to come out for the washroom. And if you go further north, you'll get to the trees that Scott was worried about, and he's already taken out the ones that are a bit further north there. No, yeah, round there, that's it. They're the ones he's already taken out, half of those. So yeah, half of those there have been taken out already. So to me, it's quite interesting what Lizzie said about that statement, because it appears to me, when I say he, it's a company, I guess, rather than a particular owner. It might be a franchise, but Scott has referred to this person as a he, as if it's a particular person that's directing the operations as well. So yeah, there's a worry that we're going to lose more of this green space.
Thanks, Hannah. I think, as Lizzie said, we remind them of their core principles when it comes to the environment.
So they basically chopped off the wildlife corridor that was running from the countryside up towards the back of the laundrette there and further on.
So would you like me to suggest a response?
Yes, please.
You moved since I last looked at the screen. Okay, so we would prefer that no trees were removed from the site. However, if this is unavoidable, we would want to make sure that the trees that are replaced are suitably sized, and at that point remind them about their core principles regarding the environment. And I think in response to Anne's point, we could just ask for a noise impact assessment as to whether or not there will be any impact on those cottages, if you feel that would be necessary.
Well, I know when Mr. Baber wanted to extend that, he's just above. When Mr. Baber wanted to build at the back of his house, he was told he couldn't because any residents that he put there would be too impacted by the noise from the factory. Yeah. So the other side of that coin is if the factory extends in any way, it will have an impact from a noise point of view from the residences that are already there, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose another part of the point is that the washrooms potentially won't create much noise if they're used for that purpose. But if in the future they want to convert those washrooms into part of the main factory, then potentially that could. So maybe it's also about a condition that retains them for use as washrooms, so that there are no further noise impacts to the adjoining residences. Yeah.
Well, and presumably if trees are removed, then that removes a noise barrier.
A noise barrier, yeah. Good point. Okay, so is everybody happy with that as a suggested response?
Can I just clarify? I mean, does that mean that we're objecting, or we're not objecting? We're kind of okay in principle, or what?
That's a good point. I think it's an objection.
Is that viable grounds for objecting, Jane?
Yeah, I mean, if we're concerned about the noise, then and the impact that will have on the adjoining properties, then yes, that's. I mean, the trees is less so, because that sort of relies on their goodwill. Because as I said, that's not a conservation area or covered by a preservation order. But yes, I think the noise issue is a good grounds to object.
Okay. And removal of trees removes a noise barrier. So
yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure if we did the proposing and seconding bit.
Not yet.
Okay.
Does someone propose for that, please? Anne, thank you. Someone second. Rich? All those in agreement? Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Were there any others that anybody particularly wanted to raise for discussion? No.
I thought your comments were excellent on all the other ones, and I just propose that we move to vote all those comments through.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we'll take that as a proposal. Thanks, Rich. Someone second that? Thanks, Sheila, and all those. Great.
And that's unanimous as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I think that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank
Jane,
you.
did you want to, oh, hang on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to share something with us, Jane, or we do that later?
Oh, if we formally end the meeting, and then we can stop recording.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
Bye.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay.